With us today are the parents of Edan Alexander, the last living American held hostage by Hamas. Thank you. Thank you. And we don't know how he's doing, really, do we? We don't know. We think we know, and hopefully positive. 2 months ago, we were pretty sure, and looked like he was getting out, but they've toughened up a little bit, and it's a terrible thing. I know what you're going through. A New Jersey boy, Edan, moved to Israel in 2022 and was taken hostage on the vicious October 7th attack on Jewish people. And now I will tell you that's an attack that would have never happened because the money was given by Iran to Hamas. Iran had no money when I was president. They were out of money. They were bust. They had no money. They weren't giving it to Hamas. They weren't giving it to Hezbollah. They weren't giving it to anybody because they didn't have any money. They were just about bust. And in fact, I put sanctions on last night. Any oil that anybody takes from Iran is not allowed to do business in the United States of America. Which is what I did the last time. That drove them into a very bad state, and they were ready to make a deal, except for the election. Didn't turn out the way it should have. It was a rigged election, and we might as well say it. But it was totally rigged. It was disgraceful. I think it's going to go down as one of the biggest. We wouldn't have, think of it, your son would be home. You wouldn't have had October 7th. You wouldn't have had the Ukraine-Russian horror show that's going on that we're trying to stop, where 5,000 young Russians, mostly Russians, and Ukrainian soldiers are being killed every single week, 5,000 a week. So think of those parents, you know, they're from Russia, they're from Ukraine for the most part, and other people, but for the most part. And that would have never happened. It was never going to happen. No chance of it happening. Putin and I talked all the time. He knew it wasn't going to happen. I told him it wasn't going to happen. And through gross incompetence, it did take place, and it's a horrible thing. And you wouldn't have had inflation. Think of it. You wouldn't have had inflation. You wouldn't have had the horror show at Afghanistan, which I think is what gave Putin the resolve to go in and do what he did, because he looked at how badly we got out. We lost 13 soldiers. 42 were horribly injured. Nobody ever talks about them. The legs, the arms, the face, horribly injured. That would have never happened. Not even possible to have happened. And we would have been out before he was out. I was the one that got it down to the 5,000, but we were going to keep Bagram, the big Air Force base, which is 1 hour away from where China makes its nuclear. That's what they do. They make their nuclear missiles, and 1 hour away from Bagram. And I said, you can't give up Bagram. They gave up Bagram, and right now China occupies Bagram. So sad, so crazy. One of the biggest air bases in the world, among the strongest and longest runways anywhere in the world. 1 hour away from where China makes its nuclear missiles. It would have been great to have. Well, we were keeping it, but they ran out of there like nobody can believe. And I think Putin saw that, and he said, wow, this is a great time I can go get, because it was the apple of his eye. I could always see that. I talked to him for hours. It was the apple of his eye, but I said, Vladimir, don't even think about it. And he wouldn't have thought about it. But when he saw that, I think that's the reason, actually, he gained some additional courage and he went in. Adi and Yael cannot imagine your pain. I just can't. Adi and Yael. But we're all alongside of you. We stand by you. And we're going to do everything possible in a very short period of time. You know, as you know, things are heating up there. I've gotten a lot of hostages out. We were getting nobody out. A lot of them are out. But they want to do it as slowly as possible because they use them as pawns. It's a horrible thing, but we're working very, very hard to save your son. We have news coming out, both good and bad, but we're working very hard. And I have many parents seeing me. I was with hostages, 10 hostages that got out. They came about 3 weeks ago to the Oval Office right here. And they said to me, it was just terrible. And I said, interestingly, because, you know, you see there's always some heart in somebody, you think. I said, so you've seen like hundreds of Hamas, right? Yes, yes. They lived in a pipe. They didn't really live in a tunnel. They lived in a pipe that was this big. They could barely breathe. It's amazing when one was in for 305 days, one was in for over 500 days. But I got them out, and through very tough, the whole thing was very tough. I said, did you ever see any love or kindness? Like, did any of these people that were guarding you, the Hamas people, did they ever look at you and say, don't worry, you'll be all right? Or did they ever look at you and say, I'm going to sneak you a little extra bread or a little extra something for eating? Did they ever give you any hope? He says, no, not one. I said, you mean, so not one person looked at you during your 1.5 years in there? One was there longer than that. One was there a little shorter than that, different times. I said, not one. No, they used to give us a smack on the face. They would never do that. They not one. So there wasn't one person out of hundreds that said, I'm going to sneak you a little bread. I'm going to make sure you get home safely. Not one. And that amazed me, because in some really bad situations, you'd have some people like that. You'd have some people like that, but not one. And they were telling the truth. I mean, they were telling the absolute truth. And when I talked to them about the way they suffered, it was incredible. In fact, I'd say 4 or 5 looked very, very solid and normal, and 4 or 5 looked like they'd been through hell, but they were all through the same hell. And I looked at them, I said, I can't imagine what you've gone through, but we're going to do what we have to do. But I asked them a question. One was wearing 59, and I said, what does 59 represent? That's how many are left. I said, all right, well, get them out. I said, are they all living? No, 24 are living. I said, 24? He said, yeah, 24, only 24. So 24 out of the 59 are living, and they knew because they had just gotten out. And what are the others? The others are all dead. But I spoke to the parents of the others, and as much as you want your beautiful boy out, they want their beautiful boy, and for the most part, as you know, boys, young boys, for the most part, but they want him out so badly. I said, is he okay? No, he's dead. But they want him out so badly, almost as much as if he were alive. It was an amazingly sad thing to see, the level of love for the children. And they didn't even view them as dead. They needed the body of their son, and they knew they were dead. But think of that, out of 59, you had 24 that were living, and now I understand it's not even that number. And young people don't die. They're very resilient. You know, you don't have young people dying. Young people are killed. Old people die. They can't take it. They couldn't breathe in some cases. They had them in a pipe, closed at both ends. If you're claustrophobic, it's a big problem. And many people are claustrophobic. But young people live, old people die, but these were young people that were dying, so you know what took place. As we bow our heads this beautiful day in the Rose Garden on the National Day of Prayer, we once again trust our lives to our liberties and our happiness to the hands of the Creator who gave them to us and who loves us. Who loves us? Think of it, where you are now, and so beautiful, but it's so nice because here you are in this unbelievable setting. I think no setting like it in the world. When you add up the importance, I take people into the Oval Office, and the biggest people, foreign leaders, princes, kings, queens, and presidents, and prime ministers, and a couple of dictators, I guess. They don't say that. They say, no, I'm a prime minister or I'm a president. And I say, no, you're a dictator, but that's okay. But I bring them into the Oval Office, and they just want to look. They can't believe it. It's the most important. And they all have beautiful offices. They are, in some cases, the wealthiest people in the world, in some cases, the most powerful people in the world. But they go into the Oval Office, and here you are right outside the Oval Office. And in one way, you're so lucky, but in another way, you're all fighting for people that you know are not so fortunate right now because of people like your beautiful son. People that are being really tortured because the level of anger and meanness thrown off by the human being, you know, they say the lions And the tigers aren't nearly as vicious as the human because they only kill for food. They kill for food. They don't kill. They kill for food. The human being kills for sport. They try and destroy people, killing or otherwise, for sport. And we've got some bad ones out there, really bad ones. We have some bad ones here. We have some bad ones in this government. But we picked good ones, but we had some bad ones in the last 4 years, the things that they did and the things they didn't do. Your son shouldn't have been there for long. That would have been so much easier to solve immediately instead of years later. And it should have never happened. October 7th, remember, would have never happened. So as we bow our heads in this beautiful day, once again, we have to trust our God, because our God knows exactly where we're going, what we're doing, knows every inch of our life. And may He continue to hear our prayers, to guide our steps and build up our beloved nation to even greater heights. We're in the process of doing some great things. I get criticized no matter what, but I just go forward because everyone knows we're right. All we're doing is what they've done to us for 40 years, but we're doing it bigger and better. That's the only thing we're doing.